Megan, welcome back to the podcast. For those who are hearing this for the first time, I highly recommend you go back a few podcasts ago and have a listen to Megan's first episode. It was fascinating, actually. She spoke about concussions as a whole, the symptoms, the long-term effects, and the best ways to manage. You can find these on our Instagram bio or YouTube and Spotify. Today, we're diving deep into the AFL's concussion protocols to help make sense of how they work and, more importantly, how they're being rolled out at a community footy and netball level. This is a must listen for anyone involved in local clubs. Megan, welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me again.
Fantastic. Now, there was one word I mentioned in there, Megan, and that was community. We hear a lot about this at this particular moment with our concussion protocols, and your first episode was brilliant in terms of how it looks and what you've been able to achieve. So the community aspect, can we just touch on that and what it looks like and what the current protocols are?
So in terms of the current AFL community protocols, so I think if we're being really broad, people will have understood 21 days, that's the minimum time frame before I'm allowed to go back and play again if I have had a concussion. So do you want me to jump now straight into breaking that all down and why it's not necessarily 21 days for everyone, or where are we going?
Well, a quick difference there, just so we understand, is that from an AFL perspective, so a non-community AFL, what's their protocol?
Yeah, correct. So for the professional AFL, and that is both for the men's and the women's teams, it's 12 days. And, you know, that is because they have got people, doctors, physios, staff who are specifically trained in concussion right there at the minute that they need it. And they also have video footage. They can go back, analyse everything. So they've got that specialist care
And daily care.
immediately and every single day.
Yep.
So they can be really specifically monitored. Community players just don't have the luxury of that, unfortunately.
So for maybe the people who haven't heard the first podcast, can we just quickly touch on your roles, concussion physio as well?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so my background, I've been a physio for, it's getting closer to 25 years now. So long background in neurology, so traumatic brain injuries, more the moderate to severe traumatic brain injury, worked in that area for many, many years. And then in more recent times have moved over to the concussion area. So been over to the States to study concussion, visit different centres over there to see what's going on, and then was part of founding the Epworth Concussion Clinic, which we started back in 2016. And now I've moved into private practice, so have the fortune of being able to work here at GSMC as one of the concussion physios here and under my business, Concussion Central.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Great asset to have, particularly this time of year. It's winter sport.
It's busy.
It's busy. Yeah. There's a lot coming through the door.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find it intriguing just what you're saying from a community level too and an AFL level, the difference on that. The days are different, but the advanced technology they have at a professional level is vastly different, and it's almost like an honesty system almost from a community protocol. Do you think, Megan? Is there some of that element to it?
Very much in terms of often there's not video footage that people are able to look at and be able to see what happened, and
no medical support on the sidelines.
No medical support on the sidelines. People are getting evaluated by GPs or emergency department who are doing the best they can, but often the GPs might not be that confident in concussion. Some are, some not. So it's very variable in terms of what's going on in the community compared to AFL professional.
So the AFL concussion protocol launched last year?
Correct.
Yes. What are some of the talking points? So if we need to wind back a little bit, what is it in particular and what are we starting to see now?
Yeah, look, I think the protocol is really guidance for all of the community clubs so that they've got something, a resource that they can go to, and then they know this is how I'm supposed to manage a concussion right from that start point of noticing a player who's had a knock and saying, okay, do we think that there's something there? So always talking about that, recognising and then looking at what's going on, removing the player from play if we think that there's a knock. So this protocol goes through that initial management on field, getting them off field, what you're doing with someone on the day off field. And then it also has really great table that steps through the progressions that we're looking at for all of the way back to return to play.
The difficulty level around this at the moment, maybe it might be best for people who are on the sidelines from a medical position each and every week, our volunteers, maybe just reiterate what a concussion is.
Yeah,
Can,
so
Megan.
it is a traumatic brain injury and it results from a knock to the head or the body. So it doesn't even necessarily have to be to the head. And that knock, there's a force involved when you knock your head or body, and the force travels through the brain. And that force then creates a change in how the cells are functioning. So it can stretch the axons in the cells, but then the cells themselves, there's a change in the chemicals that are released. The energy usage within the cells change. There can be inflammation and blood flow changes within the cells. And so you can, from that event at a cellular level, you can see immediate signs and symptoms, or it can take minutes, hours, even sometimes a day or two for the signs and symptoms to actually come on. And that's because things are changing at a cellular level. And then when we're talking about recovery, again, we're looking at cellular level changes. So that's why they've extended it out to the longer time frame, because they're thinking about, A, how long does it take for the cells to be able to recover, to be able to fire normally again, and B, how much support someone's having if we're comparing to the AFL professionals.
Yep. Fair enough.
What happens if a player goes back too soon, Megan? What do we see there?
Well, they're more at risk of a rare but very, very serious condition called second impact syndrome, which I think I spoke about more in the first podcast, which at its very worst can result in death.
Nasty. And the community level, are we getting better at it at the footy club?
I think so. I'm seeing more people coming through who've
100%.
had concussions, and they're really just trying to do the right thing, get checked out, and then they're actually listening to the guidance that we're giving. You know, an important part, which I'm sure we'll delve into more, is that not everyone is 21 days out. For some people it's longer, and people are listening to me on the most part when I advise, do you know what, you're not meeting all of the checkpoints to be able to get back for this game, so we're going to extend it out. And most people take that okay.
And I reckon that's where I substitute myself, mate.
I hope you don't mind.
I'm done.
Can we just switch the headset?
Can
I
do.
want to get someone out from behind the shadows.
Yep. She's been lurking.
You know her pretty well.
Yep.
We're going to talk to Emma Jarman. She's part owner and fair to say the behind-the-scenes person here at Geelong Sports Medicine. It is. She's just getting herself acquainted. More relevant for today, and this is what we've got you on, is you sit on the Australian Concussion Legacy Foundation board, and you've done that for the last 2 years. And also you're at the forefront in Clubland as a concussion officer ensuring compliance. So welcome to your first podcast, Emma. It's great to have you
It's great
on your own
to be
podcast.
here. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm the behind-the-scenes girl who comes out of the shadows occasionally. So
You keep us in line, though, from behind the scenes, so
yeah,
let's be fair.
try my best.
Yeah. So, as mentioned, you're sitting on the Australian Concussion Legacy Foundation board. You've done it for 2 years.
Yes.
What sort of people are you sitting on that board with?
So that is it's basically a charity organisation. It's a global charity. I sit on the Australian board, and there's a whole lot of different people from different sports, families who have lost people, doctors, scientists. So our role essentially is, because it's such a new space in Australia, is to create a bit of awareness, to raise some funds. And we're doing a lot of good things around things like concussion helplines and things. So my role here has been basically to just see how it works in a clinic environment and community-based environment. So
Hats off to you for being in that environment, first and foremost. Megan, before I get back to you, Emma, what are some of the issues you're seeing?
So I wanted to speak today just because I sit on a role as a concussion officer at the community level, and part of the protocol specifies that every club should have a community officer. So the role of that person is basically just to make sure that everyone is aware of the protocol, and also just to make sure that they're doing the right thing. So I have last year in my club, I had 15 concussions reported. I made sure that they had all the relevant information, but then also made sure that they got all the clearances and everything before they came back on club, so onto the field. So there is a duty of care, and we might talk a bit about that later on, but there is a duty of care the clubs have to now ensure they deliver to their players. And that is basically, now that we know the AFL protocol and now that they've said what it is, we need to make sure that that happens on field.
Can we talk about some of the issues that may be around the communication? We touched on it with Megan before, but potentially between player, parents, coaches. How does communication come into that with the honesty aspect? And what some of the
that's
issues
a
do you have?
massive thing for us. We might get the club might do the right thing and report the concussion to me, and I'll send the information. But then that particular person might be also playing basketball. They might be playing school football, and the 21 days exists in clubland might not necessarily carry on to their basketball field or the basketball court, or particularly around finals time, people will lie about the severity of conditions and things. So we were finding that a little bit last year, and the way we talk about it with the Concussion Legacy Foundation is it's kind of in its infancy and is still an evolving space, in that it's like where sun protection was with skin cancer and smoking was 20 years ago, that we are just trying to still get the word out there so people know that the seriousness of the condition. So it will take time for people to go, you shouldn't be playing, you've got a concussion, and almost rely on the parents and the players and the coaches and the clubs to all get behind it and make sure that we're not putting people back on too soon.
And I think to that point, there are a lot of people who are getting on board and trying to do the right thing, but won't think that basketball is actually contact sport. And so it'll be like, oh, yeah, my son was symptom-free, so I let them go play their basketball match. And I'm like, we're still only 10 days post their concussion from footy. So it's actually not okay to go back and play your basketball match, because if we get another knock right now, at a cellular level, that's going to have an impact on the recovery of the concussion.
Yeah. So I think there's been a lot of information that's been put out there in Clubland at the moment. The protocol is a really thick document and a lot of pages, and for the layperson who's a volunteer in a club, it's probably a lot.
Yeah.
We just need to be really clear that it's our job at Clubland to refer, not to diagnose, not to tell the players to go off and take 21 days. We refer them on to a medical practitioner or someone like Megan to do that. And I've heard stories of clubs who have told players who've got concussions to go and take a couple of Nurofen and things like that. That's not our job.
Yeah. And I would say, just to be really specific, the document actually outlines it has to be a medical doctor who diagnoses. So even though I know lots about concussion, and in the AIS protocol I'm allowed to diagnose, in the AFL I'm technically not allowed to diagnose a concussion. It has to be a medical doctor. So it's quite specific. And so if we're going back to duty of care, this document, I imagine, would be used to be checking off, like, has a club gone through and made sure that their players are doing all of these things, like getting the diagnosis, going through the graded return to play and meeting all of the criteria. So that part I can do. That's where Drew, the other concussion physio, and myself, we work a lot with players by testing them, seeing what's happening when you're exercising, at what heart rate, okay, how many days in are you, what exercise level are you at, are you meeting the criteria to move through the process that's outlined in the document so that you would be back by 21 days or not. So, for example, you have to have 14 days of being symptom-free at full exertion exercise and being back to full-time school and full-time work. So that's 14 days of really feeling like you're normal before you go back and play.
Okay.
So if you're looking at trying to get back to play by 21 days, you effectively need to be feeling pretty normal by day 7, and you have to have been starting exercising and been starting running and things like that. So that's actually pretty quick.
Yep.
And not everyone's going to be progressing that quickly. It doesn't mean that they won't make a full recovery if they're not progressing that quickly, but it does mean that we need to monitor when are they going back to play, because they might need to take a bit longer off.
That is interesting too, Megan, because some clubs might be wondering what that means from a training perspective. Some clubs might think, geez, can they train? But what you're saying there is, yes, we want that physical activity without the contact.
Yeah, correct. And it's all about modulating that. And what we know in the concussion space, we're dealing with your brain. Your brain's complex. So sometimes after concussion, people have more issues with like their visual tracking, their eyes or their balance than heart rate, whereas other people will have heart rate issues or neck pain. And so depending on what that person's issues are, they might be safer doing some running stuff, but they struggle with doing the drills because that's really hard from a visual perspective for the brain. Whereas other people might have more problems with the heart rate. So that's where Drew and I will look at each individual person. What are your problems? And then we say, okay, our training, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. And it's individually tailored to give their brain the best chance to recover as quickly as it can.
So I know it's an individual thing, but it's probably worthwhile just stepping through the stages of the 21 days just so that, they've got to, as you say, they've got to be hitting these markers on these set days to be able to get back. I know I've had many calls on the night before a game after 21 days saying we need to get into a GP now to get that clearance. Otherwise, they're not allowed to play tomorrow from coaches and things.
So you need a clearance.
Yep. You
Medical
actually
clearance.
have to have a medical clearance.
Yep.
And if you, I'll go through the steps because I was going to jump to near the end. I'll
Go
go
for it,
through the
Megan.
steps. But it's on the AFL Play website. If you're just Googling AFL Play Concussion Policy 2024, and there's a page in there. It's got red, green, orange. I've got it in front of me. That's the one you want to skip to, and it really lays it out quite well. You have 1 or 2 days of rest. And then after that, you're going on to walking first of all, and then you can start some light aerobic activities, so looking at 50 to 60% of your heart rate for a day. And then it's 2 days of 60 to 80% of your heart rate max. And then you're looking at 2 days of high intensity aerobic exercise. So these are the progressions that it would be in the first 7 days. So if you're meeting at the end of the 7 days, you've returned fully to school, getting your heart rate up closer towards the up to your maximal heart rate, and starting to do some weight training by the end of the week. So they're the steps in that recovery phase. And then when we move into, okay, we've got no symptoms, how are we doing our graded loading phase? That's when we start people going back to training. It's always non-contact at the start, but we're looking at people attending footy training, with at least a day in between each training, getting them to do a lot more of the drills. And then so that's your next week. And then the last week, if we're fitting into the 21 days and ticking all the boxes, that's when you have to actually go to the GP or a medical doctor and get a clearance to say, yep, I've met all the criteria, I've been back to work, been symptom-free, and they clear for contact. And the guidelines actually say that you need to do a full contact training session before you're cleared to be able to go and play. And so the GPs will give the clearance for the full contact training session, and then we have to check, did you get any symptoms with doing contact in training? And as a player, are you feeling confident to go back into that environment of a match play? And those criteria need to be met for someone to be then allowed to go back and play.
That's why you can see it's 21
in-depth.
days is a lot.
When you break it down like that, Megan's breaking it down 2 days at a time.
Yep.
The third day we're doing this. That's a fantastic. Where can we find that again, Megan?
So it's the AFL Play website, or Play AFL, one of them.
Yep.
But literally, if you Google that and then the AFL concussion policy or protocol,
Yep.
I think you have to scroll on down and find the link that has the actual handbook. It's about 36 or 7 pages. But it's inside that, and it's really well laid out. I don't know if we can do a link at the
We could definitely,
page
yeah.
note, the notes.
But, that's why we talk about the complexity of it. A volunteer at a club to know that and to be able to tell the coach and things, that's where it's really invaluable having people like Megan and Drew to be able to step you back. But there's a few things in this space. One that, and I don't want to be negative at all because I think it's a really positive thing we're doing and a step in the right direction, but GPs are still getting educated on it. So we're getting players coming back saying, oh, no, the GP cleared me, said take 7 days and I'll be right. They've rocked up to the ER department because they don't know that person falls under the AFL protocol. So there's that. It's also it's expensive to go to GPs and we really need the clubs to be educated on their insurance around player insurance so that we can make sure players aren't out of pocket too much for having to go to a GP twice, once to get diagnosed, one to get cleared, and if they need it, the graded return to play with Megan and Drew and people like.
Who's the onus on, just if there's clubs listening or players listening, who's the onus on? Is it the player or the club to get into the GP?
So I'll talk from a club point of view, I guess. The onus on the club is to make sure the information has been given to the concussed person.
Okay.
So
as in what we have here? As in
make sure they have the relevant information that they need to know to go back.
Yep.
So from a duty of care, that's where I start and end. So I refer them, I give them the information and say, you need to go and do this. It's then, I guess, on the player and even the coach to make sure that that person is cleared to come back before they can get back on the field. Would you agree?
Yeah, so I'm not a lawyer, so I'm a little cautious here, but I'm not sure because it's in the protocol that they have to have the clearance before return to play. My thought is that if the club allows them to play without the clearance, where is then the duty of care being met?
Yeah.
So, which then becomes really tricky if I've had some teenagers who might have started seeing me and then kind of gone off and not wanted to do any more follow-up and not see a GP, but then they want to play. So then they're refusing to go and get the clearance letter from the GP. So then the club's at their wits' end going, well, I want them to play, they want to play, but I don't have the documentation that the protocol says that I need.
Yeah, and I think it's very much an evolving space.
Yeah.
Even at the end of last season, I'm sitting there with this register of people who got concussed at the end of the year at my club. So what do we do with that? Like, what's the patient privacy information?
Yeah.
Like all those sort of things I still think are being hashed out, but I do think it's a really good step in the right direction.
Yeah. Just quickly too, Megan, if players are presenting to you, what are some of the questions they're asking you? And do you feel at times pressure a little bit sometimes? I know you've got a job to do and you won't waver from that.
Yeah, you've nailed it there.
Yeah.
I am a little bit of a rule abider.
Good. I mean, it's so important though, isn't it? We're seeing now, and the vulnerability around this space, we're seeing a lot more podcasts and through social media, we're seeing a lot more ex-AFL footballers coming out and discussing some of these topics because we know the repercussions of this. So it's so important to get it right.
And, even for self-protection, I don't want to put myself in a professional liability position by clearing someone when it doesn't meet all of the protocol. So I'm always going to be sticking with the protocol. But a lot of the questions, we'll have questions about work. Can I go back to work? Should I go back to work? Should I take time off? School. So I actually work with people a lot on giving advice around school and work return, as well as, what exercise should I be doing? I often will be treating people's necks, or there'll be a lot of questions that are coming up more is about the long-term impact. So we'll have discussions around how many concussions someone has had, what can be the long-term ramifications. At the end of the day, majority of the time the player needs to be making their own decisions about continuing to play or not. There are certain circumstances where that is taken out of their hands and the medical doctors will decide that. And if there's ever anything that's more complicated medically, I will refer on to specialist concussion doctors as well. But so lots of what do I do right now would be what the players are saying. How do I get back to sport most of the time? But then also what's the long-term ramifications? They're the key things that I get asked about.
Before I let you both go, how lucky are we to have
so
Megan?
Incredibly lucky. Yep. She brings a wealth of experience here. I would say she's probably one of the leading experts in the field. So we're very lucky to have her, both and Drew. And look, the people who see Megan, the ones that are really suffering from long-term concussion symptoms are all saying how wonderful it is, and they're finally getting a bit of hope, which I think was a space that they never really knew that they could get relief from symptoms they were getting and things. So, but no one likes to be told they're 21 days out of sport during the season, so that's always an interesting job. And I don't envy you having to tell people that, or people in clubland to say to people that they can't jump back on the field. So, yeah.
Well, I'm
we're
lucky
very
the media has helped me there because
Yeah.
most people already know when
Yeah.
they come to see me. But I think people just need to remember it's all about trying to help them. All we're doing is trying to protect people, and sometimes people are thinking very short term about their health rather than long term, and we're just trying to actually be the people thinking about their long term health for them.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a quick fire
Yeah.
for a bit of quick
Quick
fire.
fire.
Let's do
Megan?
it. Yeah.
Okay. True or false? You need to lose consciousness for it to be a concussion.
False.
Good one. Concussions only happen in contact sports.
False.
Concussion signs are immediate.
False.
Lots of falses going on here.
They can be immediate, but not always.
Okay. Yep. Helmets protect the brain from concussions.
False at the moment with the information we have at the moment. But they are very good at protecting the brain from skull fractures. So please wear your helmets when you are on your bikes and e-scooters. Otherwise, I have a heart attack every time I see someone on an e-scooter without a helmet. And skiing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, skiing. You got one more. You are more likely to suffer a concussion if you have already had one.
The evidence at the moment points to true for that one, particularly as the numbers of concussions increase, then that becomes more true,
Yep.
even though it should be black and white.
Yeah, so much in there. Again, we can talk a long time about this particular topic, and having you both here, I think it was opportune. So, Em, thanks very much for joining in on your own podcast.
Thanks for having me,
and having a
everybody.
listen. And Megan, again, for the second episode, great to have you and your expertise. All the best. It's a long footy season, netball season, basketball season, but as you said, we're all here for the right reasons.
Yep.
So, well done. Thanks very much, ladies.
Fantastic.
Thank
Thank you.